Welcome everyone to my impromptu medieval sewing party. I am here in historic Gyeongju, South Korea, and we are at this beautiful hanok, and I'll have my cameraman just give you a sweep of this beautiful space in which we are sewing today. Slowly, Hanson, slowly. We are at a traditional hanok stay, a bed and breakfast built in the historic architectural style of Korea. And I am going to be dressing in 18th century hanbok today. And I realized that my sokchima, my petticoat, as we would say in English, needs straps to actually stay up. So we're going to be attaching those now. The couple of days ago, we did a medieval Fingerloop braiding impromptu sewing party here, if you want to check that out, and made them. And now we're going to be attaching them. So I wanted to show you exactly how that works. So when you're done with Fingerloop braiding, you have usually two ends. You have an end like this. If you turn it around, then I can actually see it.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll turn around.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Yeah, they can see me.
Great. Now we're gonna turn the camera around so that I can actually see what's happening. Okay. Okay.
How's that look?
I'm gonna back it up a little bit. Great. And I'm gonna see about comments
I
here.
already did that.
Did you? Great. Fantastic. Okay. So we have here, welcome everyone. So we have here two ends to our finger loop braid, right? You've got this frilly end, which is where the loops are, where your fingers were. And then you've got what is the anchor end. Okay. So how do we actually now use this to attach to a garment? Good morning, Susan. Lovely to see you. Welcome back to Gyeongju.
Sewing thread.
Right. I've got it. Yeah. It's in my poof. Okay, so first thing we did was, of course, measure the straps out to make sure they're the right length. Thankfully, there was actually plenty of length in them. So now we've got to figure out how we're going to handle this. So they're actually a little bit longer than they need to be. So what that means is we're going to end up cutting them. So you're going to get to see what happens when I cut them. Right, so this is all measured out now, and you can see the pin marks basically where it needs to attach. That's how long it needs to be. And so I have two choices for how I'm going to handle this. There isn't much left. So if I wanted, I could just fold this in half like this. Right, and actually I would do that. I think I might do this and then just put whip stitches in around this to seal this up and make it basically one finished end. And then I can just whip stitch this into the edge of the sokchima here, which comes up to here on me. Okay, so that is one option. Or I could snip some of this off so that there's not quite as much bulk, and I might actually do that. But the same thing would apply. I'm going to actually take whip stitches and whip stitch this to seal it shut and create a solidly finished end. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. Welcome to my live stream, everyone. Don't forget, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the live chat. I am monitoring. And of course, hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Yeah, I know, the usual bullshit. Apologize for that. Also, let me know if you can't hear me or if there are sound issues, because that's just technology. I don't do medieval living history because I love modern technology, by the way. Okay, so I think that is what we're going to do. So in that case, I'm going to get my needle out and prepare my thread. And remember, when you are hand sewing, you are going to want to wax your thread. Here is my spool of silk thread. Nice and white, nice neutral color, and the wax did not make it in, so we will not be waxing our thread. In fact, none of my needles made it in either. That's it. Oh, you've got wax in yours? Okay. I've got a needle here, so I will be using this needle. Fantastic. Somehow none of my medieval needle cases or pin cases made it into the poof.
My wax is in my sewing kit right there.
Oh, okay, well, it's just going to have to stay there.
Well, okay.
Okay, so yeah. Hello, welcome, P. Diddy McMonkey. Hello from Texas. Well, welcome from the very distant Texas. You are now on the other side of the world. Quite literally, you are in Korea right now. And what our plan today is actually, so you should stay tuned for this and maybe check out my Travels with the Creative Contessa channel if you enjoy traveling the world and seeing reviews of restaurants and what food and lodgings are like in other places, and also flight vlogs and reviews, but museum tours, etc. If you enjoy the idea of following me on my travels, check out Travels with the Creative Contessa, because we will be live streaming later on today from a historic hanok village outside of Gyeongju. I've never been there before, but apparently people actually still still live in these historic several hundred-year-old homes, and the village still has the layout it had hundreds of years ago. So I'm very excited to go and experience that, and I'm excited to take you with me on that journey. So that's why we're here sewing, because I need to get my underclothes ready so I can put on the rest of my ensemble, my hanbok. Hanbok means Korean clothes, and I just like to remind everyone that hanbok is a new term. It's a neologism invented at the end of the 19th century, which basically marks the time at which Korea was facing colonialism from Japan, and suddenly there was an onslaught and inrush of Western-style clothing, and so there was a need to culturally define the difference between Western clothing and Korean clothing, and so hanbok literally means Korean clothes. Han is the old word for Korean, right? That's why the language is Hanguk, Korean language. Hangukgo means Korean language. Hanguk means Korean nation. A little bit of Korean language lessons for the day. Okay, so, thank you, Art Dreaming. Really appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Sarah Warfield. Visiting a several hundred-year-old village. Cool. Yeah. Well, we also did yesterday. So if you check out the tour we did yesterday morning, my time, which might have been yesterday evening or afternoon your time, depending on where you are, you can get a tour of another Joseon era village and some other ancient historic sites here in Gyeongju. So if you are interested in that, then you can go check that out. It's probably under my live streams, under the recordings. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, this is not my measured one. Go to my measured one. I'm going to actually go ahead and do a thing that might scare some of you, and I'm going to snip the ends here. Okay, so these loopy ends, I would have saved them if I needed this whole length, but I don't. I only need to there, and I don't really want this much bulk kind of pressing against my skin. So I'm going to go ahead and snip the loops away. And normally I would do this with a nice pair of shears, but I didn't actually bring shears. Okay. Snipped away. Now you'll notice that with a lot of different finger loop braids, it's not going to unravel very much. Okay, there's a limit to how far it's going to unbraid. It's not like a typical 3-strand braid where it will basically undo itself the more you move around. Okay, so now I'm actually going to fold this in half, like so. Okay, so it was like this. I'm going to fold it like this. And now I'm just going to do a series of whip stitches to secure that in place. And I'm using double thread here because I just want that extra security. Some people hate doubling their thread for sewing, and the breeze today is really trying to knot the hell out of this really fine silk sewing thread, especially because my wax is over there. And okay, I'm going to do it. It'll take me 2 seconds. I'm going to go grab my sewing wax, the sewing wax that apparently is still packaged up in the back of this room. And I'll even, no, our room's a mess. I'm not going to show you that. Okay. Be right back. Coming. 3, 2, 1, and back. Are you flossing? Are you going to finish that finger loop braid while I do this?
No, because you won't take anywhere near amount of time it will take me to finish that.
I don't know. We move pretty quickly on that. Okay, so I now have a chunk of wax, like so. And we're going to take the needle. And for those of you who've never hand sewn before, or maybe you've hand sewn but you didn't know about the waxing thing, you should always wax your thread, because hand sewing means that the thread gets a lot more wear and tear than on a machine, because you pull the thread in and out and in and out across its whole length, instead of on a sewing machine where just the thread only gets roughed up in the spot where the stitch is actually being made, right? So you want to wax your thread, and with wax you want to warm it up in your hand first. And a little bit of breath will sometimes help if it's really cold. Some of you heard this tip before, but I'll repeat it. If it's really cold, you sit on it. Use the body, the heat and pressure created by your derriere, and it will actually warm up even faster. Okay, so I can feel this getting a little sticky, and that's what you want. You want your wax to be a little sticky. That tells you that the thread will actually pull through. And you don't want to pull from the needle, right? If you're going to wax your thread, do not pull through the needle. You'll snap your needle in half. Right, so always pull. I always actually kind of start roughly from the center of my sewing thread, and I keep my thumb on it like this, and I pull, and don't, keep moving your hand. Don't pull from the length, because eventually you'll snap it, right? There's only so much tension you can apply across the whole length.
Yeah,
okay, yeah, my condottiero just admitted he'd done that. Okay, now I've got it in that half, and so I just reverse it, and do it in this direction like so. Okay, now my thread is waxed, and this will prevent knotting. It won't prevent it entirely. It will retard knotting. It will slow down the knotting process. Your thread will be less likely to knot on itself. It will also be much less likely to fray and snap, and it will actually give it more longevity in your garment as well. Okay, so here we are. Let me see. People always confuse stays with corsets, but they're super different. But I don't know if they both tighten your torso. So corset is an interesting word. The word corset actually starts being applied to, it appears in English in about the 14th century, maybe the 13th century, but for certain by the 14th century, but it is not used for the kind of garment that people think of as a corset. Okay, so I'll talk about corset and the evolution of that word later on. But first I want to focus on the technique. So what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to go ahead working along one edge. I'm going to anchor my thread. Since I have double thread, anchoring is actually really easy. So I'm just going to go through the end just before the knot, and that will anchor it in place, right? And then I am going to just go ahead and start with the whip stitching. Right. And I actually, once I put my anchor knot in, I sometimes go to the inside of the thing that I'm sewing before continuing on, because that will actually draw that knot in between the two layers, right? It gives it a little more stability, a little more protection, gets rid of some of the roughness if you really care about having those knots and edges show, right?
It hides it visually. It
hides it visually also. So now I'm going to go ahead and do my whip stitches. And actually at this point, I'm going to go ahead and angle it down so you can see me whip stitching. This is an awkward angle. And I'm going to rotate the camera around so that my condottiero, who's just pacing back and forth like a tiger in a cage, can actually monitor the chat and keep me up to date. Yeah, okay.
Ready?
Yep. And then you're going to have to go back and check out the chat for me, because I've missed a whole bunch of stuff. Now, some people might care about the color. It's, this is white going on green. I don't care about that. One, this is an undergarment. Literally, it should never be seen by anyone. Two, historically, this is just, the idea of matching thread just is not such a big deal historically. It's just not something that people generally cared about as much. For one, dye stuffs were really expensive. Two, you were not necessarily always going to just have on hand a thread that exactly matched the color of the fabric you were sewing. And if you start looking at extant garments from various periods that have survived well enough for the sewing thread to actually have survived, which isn't always the case, by the way, you'll start to see that it's just not a concern that people generally had.
Okay, this is not a restream.
This is not a restream. This is
not a restream.
Not a restream. Yes, correct. Oh, right. No,
so
it is not.
This is live, cats.
Oh, right. We should have done this through Restream. Anyway, well, you should have done it through the Restream software. No, this is live. This is not a recording. You are absolutely catching us live. So
beautiful.
I will happily answer any questions you guys have. And I'm sorry if I missed something. My condottiero is now looking back through the live stream or the chat to see what I may have missed.
Subscribed. I look forward to seeing your travels. I've only sewn by machine. Yeah, it worked, but it looked like crap. Evil Dave.
Yeah, machine sewing has its perks. Obviously, speed is amongst them. And for certain kinds of stitches, a sewing machine will give you perfection, especially on long seams that are inside, But it does take I find it's actually sometimes harder to work with a sewing machine because it moves so quickly that it's easy for things to get out of whack and out of line if you don't have the technique for it.
Hi to Lucia.
Hello, Lucia. Thank you for joining us today.
Stays compress the bustling by at least 4 inches with a support ending at the top of the hips rather than a modern support bearing on the shoulders.
Yes, I absolutely agree that stays and or corsets are a much more comfortable, superior form of support to our modern bras, at least in terms of where the pressure is put. Now, obviously, it comes with the downside, then your lower abdomen is in some way restrained, and it does limit the ways in which you can bend I'm not saying it's impossible, but you just can't quite, you don't have quite the same flexibility in your waist as you do if you didn't have stays. And yes, I have worn stays for protracted periods of time and done everything you can imagine in them. So I do know from personal experience. Okay, so here we have this frilly bit. And actually, if I hadn't gotten so busy talking to you guys, I would have actually very first thing whip stitched this shut before it could fray even that much. So I'm now going to go ahead and just whip stitch it. And I'm probably going to use a blanket stitch at this point to try to catch this up. It's not a big deal because it's on the inside, as I said, or a buttonhole stitch. Probably going to buttonhole stitch the end here.
Hello to Michael.
Hello, Michael. Thank you for joining us today. And I also apologize if there's a lag in my responses. One, I missed a whole bunch of comments while I was talking. Two, sometimes there is a lag between when you send me your comments and when I do the thing.
James.
Hello, James. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, everybody. The thing you hate hearing from us creators, but you have to understand how essential that is for our channels to actually thrive and for us to actually get paid for what we do.
Okay, good. Yep. Whip it into place. Good. Actually, the Fingerloop braid I completed yesterday is the other shoulder strap today.
Yeah, we have a pair of Fingerloop braids that we're going to be sewing on, and one of them I did, and one of them the Condottiero did, and it's pretty easy to tell who did which one. Although actually, as we found out, this particular broad lace of 5 bows is actually very forgiving, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we dropped and we forgot what we were doing left, right, and center, and it didn't really seem to ultimately matter. So I don't really like doing buttonhole stitches with double thread if I can avoid it, because it can be a pain in the butt to get the loops to actually all pull through at the same time. Hence why we've got a strange little loop there. But again, I don't really care too much about this one because it's going to be an undergarment that no one is ever going to see, and it doesn't see a whole lot of wear and tear. I'm not exactly kickboxing in my hanbok, although that would be an interesting video, obviously.
Yeah, I almost did it yesterday.
Yeah, if you want to see me pseudo kickboxing in my hanbok, you can check out the short I published on what happens when your finger loop braid loops are too long. Because my Condottiero made the loops and he made them about 5 feet long, and I'm only 5'6". So that meant that there was some serious toe work involved in working on that braid. But the toe work actually kept it nice and tight. It made a really nice looking braid, as far as we got anyway, before we were told we weren't allowed to do finger loop braiding on the bridge. Oh well, whatever.
Let's see here. 18th century stays were constructed with actual whaleboning. Yes, that's true. Wolf.
Yeah, it is true. And whalebone, really, it's this wonderful. If any of you ever actually held a whalebone in your hand, it's not a bone, of course, which makes it super flexible, and it is the ultimate in corsetry and stay material. For obvious reasons, it is highly illegal now in many countries to procure whalebone, and maybe even to possess it, depending on where you are. So even though it is a dream material, please don't use actual whalebone to make your reproduction stays. It's not cool. I guess if you're using stuff that's historical and it's already out there in the environment, but that could also encourage, a resurgence of the whaling industry in places where it should have died. It is still legal in Japan, apparently, to whale, and my Korean friends tell me it is in Korea as well, although they weren't quite certain about that. Okay, so can they actually see this?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the package. This is what the end looks like, and you see there's these little frilly bits. I'm just going to trim those up a little bit. Not all the way down to the thread line, just a little bit, just so there's not so much. See how nicely that trims up? Do they see how nicely that trims up?
Yeah.
Okay. So there we have our little package. Okay. And I'm now going to go ahead and attach it to the end because the thread's already there. So why restart if I can just go right to it? So this is the sokchima, and sokchima means literally underskirt in English. Sok is under, chima is skirt, and this is not really a historical style of sokchima. Unfortunately, this was the first ever hanbok I commissioned back in my almost 10 years ago, and I didn't understand that hanbok makers really like to do modern hanbok, modern style hanbok, and when you tell them, I want it to be exactly like the picture, and you give them a picture, they're not going to make it exactly like the picture. That's not going to happen. So she made me a modern style sokchima instead of an authentic 18th century style sokchima, but that's okay.
Abdullah says hi.
Hello, Abdullah. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Wolf has an interesting comment here. Have you learned of the late South Korean fashion designer Kim Ryul, who incorporated historical hanbok fashion into his modern designs? His work is highly regarded in South Korea as well as globally. Yep, I don't think we know.
Did he say as well as Galway?
Globally.
Globally. Wait, what was the name again?
Kim Ryul?
Yes. There is a display of his work at the Daegu National Museum.
Oh.
Yes. Which we will be taking a live tour of next Tuesday, because the museum is closed on Monday. So if you would like to join me for a tour of the Daegu National Museum, where we will be exploring the extant historical Korean clothing that they have there on display, and they have some amazing things there. Stay tuned for that. Okay, so before we get to more comments, I'm just going to talk about what I'm going to do next. So now I have a couple of choices. I could, and I think I might just whip stitch it right to the edge here, or I could bring it a little bit in underneath and whip stitch it in there, but that's going to create a point of pressure against my skin, right? And that'll be, because this is pretty thick, that'll be unpleasant. I can also actually put it on top. And as I'm thinking about it, I think probably putting it on top and overlapping it a little bit is the way to go. Because again, this is not going to be on, it's never going to be seen. So I don't care if it perfectly goes here and is perfectly covered. And that way it will not press into my skin. So these are considerations you need to make when you are attaching your finger loop braiding onto your garment, right? Does it need to go underneath? Does it need to go on top? Should it be attached right to the edge? Depends on its function. These are not there for aesthetic purposes. These are straps, so they're practical, so I need to keep that in mind. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I've actually pulled the thread. I don't think I told you what I was doing, but the thread ended here, my needle ended here, so I just inserted it, buried the needle, and brought it up here to where I'm going to actually start my whip stitching. And I'm not even going to bother pinning it on. There's no point in potentially stabbing myself. I'm just going to use my thumb and my middle finger to clamp it in place and hold while I whip stitch. Okay, questions or comments?
Backwards.
Yes.
Susan says on top seems the way to go because not scratching skin.
Yep.
Distrack says hi.
Hello, Distrack. Thank you for joining us today.
And Cats Will Be Cats thinks that the robe-like dresses from the classic 1700s French dress need that stomacher. Without it, it's ugly and looks plain.
Agree 100%, Kat. You absolutely need that stomacher. And actually, and interestingly enough, the stomacher is invented in the 15th century. And if you watch my Getting Dressed videos on getting dressed as the Burgundian Contessa, you will see me actually put on the forerunner of the stomacher. They would literally take a piece of fabric and cover over the laces on their undergown, their kirtle. And then that is what would actually get seen in the opening of the overgown. And you actually start seeing the stomacher, as it's called, sorry, in 15th century English, in household accounts, in royal expense accounts of Scotland in the 1470s. Her expense accounts has several entries for different stomachers, as we'd call them modernly, and some of them are lined in fur. Oh, yes. No, continue, no problem. No, it's just fine. No, continue. Yeah.
Rosie says hi.
Rosie, welcome. So I'm just doing, oh wow, that got a little messy. That's what happens when I wasn't paying attention. I don't know that I care enough that there's a couple of threads. So this is the double thread danger. Remember, I was telling you sometimes the two sides of the thread won't pull through evenly and you have to pull on one a little more than the other. And I was talking, so I wasn't paying attention. Do I care right now? No, I don't. Not enough to undo it and redo it.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to check out Kim Ryul's stuff at the museum.
Yeah, his stuff is pretty cool. I agree 100%.
K-pop groups.
Yeah, there is happily a resurgence, a rediscovery within Korea of its historic and traditional clothing styles, and they're increasingly, designers are actually incorporating that in to their lines. and that means and you can actually, there is an increasing number of even younger Koreans wearing modernized hanbok to, you know, still allow for a modern lifestyle, but you still have like the jogori line of the top, or a chima, the chima shape in the skirt, but instead of it going to the ground or dragging on the ground, it only goes to the knees, for instance. And you can actually buy modernized hanbok in an increasing number of tourist destinations. Gyeongju, for instance, there are shops that sell them. In Sadong in Seoul. Not so much we haven't really seen it so much in Daegu, except that Daebak department store actually for a couple of months ago was indeed selling a designer line of hanbok. And I meant to go back and check that out because I'm all about the hanbok, but I didn't. I don't know if they still have it.
Hi from Sandra in Sweden.
Hello, Sandra. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so I have now reached the end, the top here, and I'm just going to go ahead and put in a knot to kind of cap off the line of stitching, as it were. And if there had been a longer amount of stitching needed, I generally put a knot in, a securing knot every 10 to 15 stitches, so that if something snaps or wears or otherwise breaks, then it only can unstitch so far, right? That's the goal. Okay, so now the other thing I could consider doing, if I really want to give this extra security and extra attachment, is now I can actually go onto the back side, bring my needle back here, and I can put some whip stitches attaching it along the top. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm actually catching some of the back of and going through all the previous straps that have broken. You can tell this is a high traffic area of this silk chima because this is now the third set of straps it's had. Apparently I'm hard on my garments, but I think we all knew that.
Yeah.
I think everyone knows the Contessa's very active lifestyle in all periods of history means that all of her garments see significant wear and tear. Which means I actually get to wear these things the way real people probably wore them, not as a decorative set costume for a play, but as real daily clothing. So yeah, I know how clothes actually wore, and I'm absolutely the happiest when my historic garments develop exactly the same wear and tear spots, as my reproductions develop exactly the same wear and tear spots as the historic extant garments that we have excavated or otherwise that have been preserved. Yeah, that's like hashtag goals, reenactment goals. Wear your clothes out the way your ancestors did. Okay, so that's it. This is how I've attached it. Ignore those little loops where I wasn't paying attention, but you can see that one of the big advantages of Fingerloop braiding is that the stitches really do disappear into it. You can barely, and you can only see it at all because it's white. If I used a dark color thread, you wouldn't see anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just knot off. Not off. I'm certain that's got to be a verb, right? I'm going to just put in one last little knot. And then whenever I finish my lines of hand sewing, I always bury the needle and bury the thread. And you can see here, this double thread is trying desperately to not be equal with each other. And one of the tricks I use when I'm using double thread like this especially, I usually stick a finger under the loop when I'm pulling it so that it pulls evenly and doesn't double up on itself or otherwise create a knot in advance. It's just one of my personal techniques. Okay, so now I stick the needle into the finger loop braiding like this, all the way through, pull it. Again, making sure it's even. And now I will just snip it at the very edge here, and that way the end basically vanishes into it and it's even more secure. Okay, now we're going to repeat that on the other sides, plural.
So Rill's dead, evidently. He passed at age 32. Sad. So glad we'll get to see his work. Susan asked, what sports like croquet would you play in medieval Florence and Burgundy?
Oh, sports. Well, croquet is actually a pretty old sport. Pall Mall, I think it was called in 16th century English. So there seemed to be, there's a cut. So men would have played a dangerous sport that they still play in Florence as part of the feast of St. John the Baptist, calcio. Right, and calcio, I know that is the word for soccer, but the medieval version is like soccer with rugby. It's basically rugby is what it is, and it's super violent, and people died. And they played it then the way they often play it now, with the various neighborhoods competing against each other, and there'd be a feast and there'd be dancing. Like, it wasn't just the sport. But I'm confident there were also a lower key, less deadly versions that were played in amongst, just energetic youth. There's depictions of ball games that are played by men and women. We don't know exactly what they were. We don't know the rules. We know they seem to be throwing one person is holding a ball and obviously in an attitude to throw it, and another person is preparing to catch it or dodge it. We don't know. A game that was also played between youths was called Civettini, and this one is very silly. There's a depiction of it in a...
Oh, he asked if you use beeswax to smooth and control your thing.
I do, absolutely. Question about the beeswax. Yes, I waxed my thread at the very beginning of, right after I threaded the needle. I waxed my thread after threading the needle. That's just what I do. You don't have to do that, but I find it easier to thread the needle without the wax on your thread first, and then thread the wax after you've threaded it. So yeah, absolutely. Always wax your thread.
Tamar Queen said hi.
Oh shit, I wasn't paying attention. Damn it. Okay, well, everyone, I got so busy talking to you, I wasn't paying attention, and I'm now attaching the other side, which is the starting point of the finger loop braiding, to the inside. But that's kind of okay, because this is a finished end. It doesn't need any kind of stitches to make it neat and tidy, because it's the start. So it won't create a big fat point of bulk against my skin, but it means that one side will be different than the other. Oh well, I don't really care at this point.
Tamar Queen said hi.
Hello, Tamar. Thank you for joining us.
Cats Will Be Cats said, fun fact about the Philippines, the Filipinos don't only have one type of traditional clothing, they have varieties from each different tribe and province.
That makes sense.
Also works for languages.
Yeah, also works for well, and because the Philippines are it's an archipelago of, I think, thousands of islands, actually, depending on what size you count as an island, that you're going to get such a variety of local culture developing, language too, of course, as you say. And depending on different islands, even in the same latitude, can have completely different climate conditions, different landscapes. You see this in the Canary Islands. Some of those islands are, so volcanic. I'm thinking of Terceira as to be utterly, it's bleak, and that's going to give you a different kind of lifestyle than, a nice verdant more tropical island that's probably going to be moister and more humid. And yep. Yeah, it is funny. We've everything is so globalized now that we've lost sight of how local things can actually be.
So Jada Cuero, do you make candy? Kandi? I'm not sure what that is.
I do not know what candy is spelt that way. If that's just an interesting spelling of candy, as in a sweet thing that you eat. I have absolutely made different kinds of candy. I do it all. I cook, I clean, I sew, I craft, I translate documents from dead languages into modern ones. I translate documents from living modern languages into other living modern languages. I travel, I dance.
Dominic Ballesteros says hi.
Hello, Dominic, you said? Dominic, hello. Thank you for joining us today. Oh. Yeah, some of this edge is really, really thick. That's okay. So the problem with me putting this on the backside is I'm now having to actually sew through all of those layers of old strap. So that is a little bit of a challenge, but that's okay. Not a big deal. Okay, and now I will come to the front side and put in those whip stitches that on the other side were on the back. So back to Civettini, Susan's question about 15th century sports. Civettini is actually depicted on this desca del parto, which literally means birth tray. And it shows these three young men basically in a straight line with their feet stepping on each other's feet, and it looks like they're trying to slap each other, but they're actually not trying to slap each other. They're trying to slap each other's hats off. And it's yeah, we've reconstructed this game. Even though you are technically aiming for each other's hats, it is not probably a coincidence that you do end up, in fact, slapping each other. So that is a game that I would say is probably uniquely for the overly spirited youth of 15th century Florence and not aimed at women. Just doesn't seem like it would be very fun to play. It is certainly fun to watch.
Phoenix says hi and explains that candy is a specific style of beaded bracelet and cuffs and necklaces.
Oh, interesting. What culture or historical era, Phoenix, for the candy? Thank you for explaining that. I have never heard of that before.
And Vivi Medina asks, how do you keep your clothes so white? We changed the settings on the phone.
Yeah. How do we keep them so white? I have a filter on my camera that makes whites look whiter. No, I'm joking. So basically, I use modern methods for that just because I live in an apartment and have been living in an apartment for a very long time. So I don't really have the luxury of experimenting with the historical methods, which would involve fermented urine. Yeah, so I OxyClean and vinegar and baking soda and lots of soaking, long soaking, like overnight soaking in hot water for my whites, and sometimes multiple washes. And that's how you do it.
Kaylee Falat says, hello, how are you both doing today?
Oh, Kaylee, it's lovely to see you. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We are doing very well. We are still in Gyeongju, in this fantastic, beautiful, peaceful, historic part of Korea, one of the most beautiful places in the world, honestly. And we are just preparing to go to a Joseon-era traditional hanbok village. So, that makes it even more exciting, and that I get to combine it with my love of sewing and crafting and share it with you guys. Well, it's just generally a good day.
Katz has an interesting question for you about the hanbok. How do hanbok skirts look so puffy compared to the kimono and to the hanfu?
That is a very good question. So actually, the puffiness of the Korean hanbok is created by layers, lots and lots of layers. And earlier in Korea, so in the Shilla dynasty, they weren't puffy. They definitely looked more like what you would expect to see in, say, a Chinese court. So first off, you've got the paji. You can see the pants here. And these have lost their starch, but they should probably be starched. So that adds one layer of stiffness. And then over top of that comes a puffier pair that's also starched. And then a couple of layers of skirts that are also starched. And then a skirt goes on top of that. And poof, you've got the poof. So the outfit I was wearing yesterday in the Fingerloop braiding short I did, that is poofy because I'm wearing a pair of paji, 2 underskirts, and an overskirt. And one of the underskirts I've actually pinned up in a way to make it even poofier because I actually don't have the second pair of pants that I should have that have a balloon-like effect. I'm actually planning on doing a presentation on historic Korean clothing, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so now I'm on the second strap. And this one is a little longer. And the end, unfortunately, this one was mine. This is definitely mine. Yep, much more mistakes. So the beginning is not as neat as it was on this one. This one has a perfect beginning. I mean, look at that. That is just perfection for my condottiero. Meanwhile, I was distracted by talking to you all, and so my beginning sucks. So I'm going to have to do something different here than I did on the other one. So I'm basically going to apply the same technique that I would apply on the loopy end, as it were. So the loopy end, just to be clear, this is the loopy end. This is the part that would go around your fingers, and this is the beginning. And it should be much nicer than this, but because I was still figuring it out and making every kind of mistake you can imagine, I'm going to treat it like the loopy end. So what I mean by that is I'm just going to actually fold this over like this, and I'm going to make a package like we did on the other one on the loopy end.
The name I can't read, unfortunately, because it's in pictographs, said hi. It's like the Japanese or Korean, or Chinese. I'm terrible at telling which one. They say hi, though. Oh,
hello. I'm sorry that we cannot read any of the Japanese scripts. I can read like 4 characters in Chinese. I recognize the character for gate. I recognize the character for middle or medium, which is also the character for China. I recognize the character for mountain, and I recognize the character for people. And I think I might recognize a couple of others, but those are the ones that come to the top of my head.
And then Gretchen Schroeder says they're prepping warp for spring while you sew. Fun.
They are, yeah. So actually, do you want to just go? We're going to show you the garden, this amazing garden that's here in this hanok where we're staying. A garden like this requires quite a bit of care and tending. And so they're out here every couple of days trimming and maintaining and sprucing up and pruning, weeding. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Gretchen said she's prepping her warp for spring.
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant that they were prepping the garden. I had misunderstood my condo. Prepping your warp for sprang. Sprang, right?
Spring.
Sprang. Oh, very cool. What are you planning to make with your sprang, Gretchen? A nice lacy inset for some 15th century, sexy 15th century undergarments, or a lacy inset for a sexy 15th century coif, or some other garment from some other period of history? Very cool. I have actually not yet learned sprang. It is on my list of handcrafts to learn, though. Okay, so basically I've whip stitched that to there, and now I'm just going to go, and I should have actually started, it wouldn't have mattered. I'm going to pull the needle through like that because I don't need whip stitches on the finished end, and keep whip stitching.
Hey, Susan, I don't know why your long comment would have a red line through it. I'll check and see if it's the one that's held for review. No,
Yeah, Susan, none of your comments should get blocked. You've never been a problem on my channel, unlike some other people. You've always been great for my channel.
I'm about to
Yeah,
block right now.
like this particular piece of garbage we're about to block. Yeah.
And I have.
And blocked. There we go. Yes, I absolutely do curate my community. I don't have time for negativity, and it's not negativity. I don't have time for slander and disgusting comments.
Gretchen's making a hairnet for a Merovingian.
Ooh, nice.
Descendants Lover says your dress is so pretty.
Which dress? I don't know. What can they see?
They can see your actually.
Oh.
Maybe from yesterday. I'm not sure.
Okay. Which dress? First, I'll thank you for that.
Maybe they're talking about your top. Because your top is pretty.
Okay. Thank you for that compliment. Are you referring to the top that I'm wearing right now? I know probably all looks like it's one dress, all this sort of endless package of fabric.
Susan asked if you were able to get the asphalt out of the Gemara.
I have not yet gotten the asphalt out of the Gomorrah, but I will also admit I haven't had time to try. So no, but that's not because that's not a failure. I just haven't done it yet. Okay, so now this is a package.
Katz knows some numbers, but doesn't know the characters for the numbers in Chinese.
Yeah, I do know some of the numbers, but not enough. And actually, I never thought I would need Chinese. Well, I don't travel in China very often, not because I don't want to necessarily see the amazing beauties, meet the people, and experience all the different kinds of special local cuisines. But I think you might understand why I, as an American, might not want to spend much time in China these days.
So you've got some new people.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thalia and... I can't read your name. No, Katz, your chat is not blocked.
Yeah, Kat, your chat is not blocked. If it hasn't shown up yet, it could be a lag.
Or if I missed it.
Or maybe we missed... hopefully no one's getting... no one who shouldn't be, anyway, should be getting blocked.
Thalia asks where this is.
We are in Gyeongju, Korea, South Korea. This is a traditional hanok bed and breakfast.
And I just popped it out of the
And it is built in a historic hanok style. The word hanok is also a neologism, by the way. Was invented at the end of the 19th century when the Japanese started... Uh-oh. I put my needle down. No. Oh, there it is. Thank God. Okay. Was invented when the Japanese basically occupied Korea, and then they started using the term hanok to differentiate between the modern buildings that the Japanese were building in the style of that era, the colonial style, and the actual historical Korean architecture. So yeah, that's where we are. We are in Gyeongju, which was the capital of the Shilla Empire in the first millennium, known as Kumsong back then, which literally means like fortress of gold, also known as Sorabul, which I think also means city of gold in a different dialect. So I am using double thread for this because this is a wear and tear spot for those who missed the initial introduction where we discussed what I'm doing here. And I am about to wax my thread so you can see what happens there.
And you're repairing a garment.
I'm repairing a garment. This is a silk chima. This is a Korean underskirt, basically a Korean underdress, and the straps had basically completely worn away. So 2 days ago, actually, we finger loop braided replacement straps, and now I am attaching them. So we've attached the first strap. That's how it looks on that end, and that's how it looks on this end. And now we'll be putting in the second pair. Oh, that's what
You
I
went the wrong way, didn't
Oh,
you?
yes, I did. Okay, everyone. Well, so yeah, this is what happens when you get excited about talking to people and you don't pay attention. There is a front and there is a back, most definitely, and this is not it. This is the back. So I attached a back strap to the back, and I'm glad I did that, figured that out before we got too far.
Yeah, I was looking at the...
Well, this is a chance to correct me having put this on the inside. It's now going to get cut. So now you're going to see the most heart-wrenching thing that you can ever watch a creator, a sewist do, undo their work. Yep. Okay, here we go.
So, Phoenix, we visit Korea a lot. We don't live here right now, but we have lived here for, what?
8 of the last 11 years have basically been spent in Korea. And yeah, we're here currently on a long-term visit. We're hoping to live here once again. But basically, we know Korea well enough like we live here, but we still like to travel around because most of the tourism in Korea is actually domestic. It's mostly Koreans who are traveling in Korea. Most, the West hasn't really quite cottoned on to the amazing travel opportunity that Korea is.
Kaylee says, I have a lady I'm helping to make a dress who gets hot flashes.
Ooh,
Do you have
okay.
any suggestions on what I can do to keep her cool in her event clothing?
Linen, okay, first off, the most important thing for staying cool is a linen underlayer, and one that's not too dense. Right, so not a really heavy, thick linen underlayer. Go with a finer linen underlayer because wow, I sewed this on really so well. Okay. So I recommend a linen underlayer, and if she doesn't care so much about authenticity, then maybe also a linen base layer. I might be able to advise you better if you tell me what period and era of clothing, if that applies to this situation. But in general, linen, if she doesn't care about authenticity, then linen for all the layers. And I say it that way because in medieval Europe, there's actually almost no evidence of linen overgarments for women, as in, like, none. And there's very little evidence of linen overgarments for men. It just seems to not be something they did very often or at all. Exceptions, there are arming garments. They tend to be made of fustian, which is a linen cotton blend. And I have one evidence of a suit of livery, a servant's livery, from, I think it was the Potsy, actually, to one of his servants that was a fustian suit. It was a fustian farsetto and a fustian giornea.
She's not being too particular on time period between
Okay.
12th and 15th century.
Okay. If she doesn't care too much about authenticity, then my recommendation is linen all the way, baby. Linen all the way.
So for Kat, some of the traditional houses in Korea back in the 1900s were made of mud, looking more like a hut instead of the refined hanok, but it just depends on what level of society you're talking about.
So in Korea, as in Europe, historically, different levels of society had different qualities of lifestyle. So yes, lower classes, but they weren't entirely of mud. They were still wooden frame with straw interior. It's just that there was no exposed wood, so they were entirely covered in daub, and then they had thatched roofs instead of tile roofs. And this is actually an important distinction in the home because they didn't necessarily identify homes by size. The word for mansion isn't necessarily the way it is in English, where mansion implies a massive home. The word for mansion is giwatib, and that means tile house. Tile house, because the roof is made of tile, because tile was the roofing material of choice for the upper class. It was the most expensive, right? And so then I forget what there's another word for another kind of roof, and then a third kind for thatched roof, and I forget what the thatched roof was.
So for Alan, it's both. It's culture, history, and crafts.
What was it?
The question was, what am I watching here? And then, is this culture, history, or crafts?
Yeah, Alan, this is culture, history, and crafts. You get it all on my channel because I honestly, those things to me are not separable. Crafts are a reflection of a culture and a history, nearly always. They don't come out of, they're not dropped off by a stork with nothing, with no background. And so, yeah, culture, history, and crafts is basically the focus of the creative Contessa.
Kaylee says, thank you so much. She'll tell her.
Yeah, and Kaylee, there's different grades of linen. So you've got different densities, different thread counts, basically. So probably I would recommend a medium weight for her. You can't really go lightweight because on all the layers, you can go lightweight on the bottom layer. You can't go lightweight on all the layers though, because then the overlayers won't hang properly. You really do need a heavier weight of linen if you're going to do overlayers. But by that token, I don't mean canvas. You don't need linen canvas, right? Yeah. I really do believe that culture, history, and crafts go hand in hand. Any handcraft I learn, I always want to know about its history, where it came from, where it is now, where it's going, if it has any cultural significance of particular, what does that say about a people that they have that craft?
Susan says, Korea is gorgeous, full of intriguing history, clean and safe. The latter two I get from watching your vlogs. True. Gretchen says she also has a double hen in the works for the elevation of a mutual friend.
Nice. Very cool.
And can you shout out the tribal chief Robert? We don't know the tribal chief Robert. Somebody posted in Korean. Let me see if I can read this.
Giwatib.
Gwe? Giwatib Gwe? Chogijib. I'm not sure if that's a comment or a question or just putting in the Korean there for us to see. A held review.
Oh, they might have been trying to give us the word for the thatched roof. Possibly.
I think people stopped wearing layered clothing because the ozone layer broke, or modernization. Probably just modernization.
Right. So I actually have an answer for why we stopped wearing layered clothing. One, things that used to be underneath just became outerwear. So the modern men's shirt, the button-down shirt, for almost all of history, that was an undergarment. And that was the thing that was worn against your skin and got the hell worn out of it. But basically, once we there was specifically for women's garments. Once we started inventing all of these synthetic fibers, apparently people decided, well, we don't need all these layers anymore. We don't need. Oh no, that was it. Modern washing machines. Right. It was synthetic. That was it. Sorry, I didn't remember what it was that I read. It was an essay. So one, synthetic clothing fibers that don't stain very easily and that can have the hell laundered out of them and still come out looking good on the other end is one part of that equation. The other part of that equation is washing machines, actually, which makes laundering easier. And so you no longer have to have a special layer that is only the laundering layer, so to say. Right? Because before that, your clothes, the only layer of clothing that really got washed with any regularity was the underlayer, was the white underlayer. And all the other layers just got stain treated. Right. So then, of course, there's also the invention of the modern no, don't do that. I almost brought this through the strap. Then, of course, there's the invention of the modern world. Things got faster. We started developing new modes of transport. People start traveling everywhere. And, to be honest, one of the things I hate the most in historic garments of any period, pretty much, is getting into a modern vehicle. Whether it's a bus or a car, they are not designed to go into those tight spaces, and it is so uncomfortable. So I kind of also feel that might have something to do with it, that we developed these modes of transportation and started using them that did not work with all of those layers. They just don't. Yep. But I have to say, I like layers. And it's funny that some people will still wear layers, just not for the same reason. You know, if you're visiting a place where the weather is variable, where you might start with a cool morning, a cold morning, a warm middle of the day, and then a cool evening, then people will wear layers that they take off and put back on as the day progresses. Okay.
Alan said, he's the one that asked about culture.
Right.
Said, well, I'm glad I found this because I enjoy both history and crafts. Is this only Korean culture craft, or do you cover other culture crafts, European, Native American, Aztec, etc.?
Yeah. So far my channel covers a bunch of different European crafts and some Korean crafts. That doesn't mean that's where it's always going to stay only, but yeah, no, I do a lot more actually European handcrafts than I do Korean. We just happen to be in Korea, and I happen to need my historical Korean clothing. Well, need is a strong word. I want my Korean clothing for this site. Yeah, he says I need it. He's probably right. I definitely do lots of historical European handcrafts. My channel is full of them. And this is actually a combination of crafts that you see here. So this finger loop braiding, this is a technique that is documented. The instructions are documented in 15th century European sources, or the earliest we have. But we have extant bits of finger loop braiding from all over the world, dating back really, really far. And there's a 15th century, I know some of you have heard this, but I'll say it again. There's a 15th century depiction of a Japanese noblewoman finger loop braiding. So this is a technique that definitely spanned the world. So it is conjectural in this application, but I needed straps and I didn't have any cloth with me here in Gyeongju, but I did have the materials for finger loop braiding. So there we go. Okay.
And that's what we're doing here. Preparing a dress and holding forth on culture.
Yep.
And tell them to double tap that screen. I'm not sure what that means. Does that have people like and subscribe to it?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. What does double tapping the screen do? Clearly, I'm about to learn something. Okay, so yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, guys.
Fogwall.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. If that's what double tapping the screen does, yeah, please do that. And if you enjoy travel and culture and history, then check out my Travels with the Creative Contessa channel, because I cover that pretty extensively over there. We do plan on doing a live tour of Gyeongju National Museum tomorrow. And, it does lights on the phone? Cool. Yeah. Good to know.
Very cool.
We do plan on doing a live tour of Gyeongju National Museum tomorrow, where you will get to see all sorts of stunning first millennium art and crafts and pottery and royal regalia. And we also plan on, today we're going to be doing a live stream tour from the historic village that we're going to once we get this finished. Of course, many of you, I suspect, are going to be asleep by then, but you will be able to watch it as a recording if you want to catch up on our adventures there. Yeah. And Saturday morning Korea time, which will be probably middle of the night or late evening or early afternoon for most of you, we will have another live medieval crafting party where we will be doing something, possibly finger loop braiding, possibly something else. It depends on what I have that I need to work on. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to...
Fogwalls from Switzerland. Cats will be cats, as in Korea, they just layer skirts, but in Western countries they use panniers or crinoline.
Yep. Exactly.
Great view. I agree.
Oh no. Needle, compact needle. Oh, there it is. Disadvantage of white thread and a silver needle on a white background. It's easy to lose. So easy.
Fogwall is evidently from Switzerland, and they says, great to see people with great passion.
Very cool. Thank you for joining me from Switzerland. It's like the middle of the night there. Are you a night owl? Or are you not in Switzerland at the moment? Yeah, I will say I am generally a passionate person. There is nothing in my life that I approach with anything less than passion. It is very true. That's how I roll. Passion for the win. So we've got quite a bit of live streaming planned. Tonight, we're going to be doing a nighttime tour of Gyeongju, of some of the historic sites, including the reconstructed parts of a 7th century pleasure palace, which will be beautifully illuminated, and the, oh my God, stunning Wolgyo, the bridge of filial non-filial piety, which will be also illuminated in the most magical way. So that will be morning, not morning to early morning in the Americas, depending on where you are, and or sort of midday if you are in Europe, and obviously that will be evening if you are in Asia, Australia.
Evidently, Fogwell, it's 4:47 a.m. there, and they work till 3 in security.
Ah, right.
And Alan asked if this also by chance covers cooking, which...
Yes, I do actually do cooking as well. I have a video on reconstructing a medieval recipe, and I've got a couple of other cooking things on the channel as well. So yeah, basically, and some other shorts on medieval dining and medieval dining habits. And yeah, basically, if they did it in the Middle Ages, I cover it. Don't forget to keep your heels tucked. Yeah.
My back.
Yeah. So yeah, this basically, if it's an aspect of material culture of the past, I absolutely cover it. Of course, YouTube punishes channels that try to be broad the way I am. You know, even though it's all connected by the theme of history and culture, YouTube does not like that at all. So when I publish a cooking video, it usually punishes my channel. How stupid is that?
Do you have any moderators? Just us.
I mean, I do. We have one. I have my moderator who's behind the camera right now.
Hi.
Yeah, he's there.
Turn around, they can see me.
Yeah, you can see him in his 18th century style Joseon attire.
Here's. Gotta turn it back around now.
Yeah, unfortunately, we no longer have a cot, and we rented one yesterday, but we're probably not going to be able to do that today. The cot is the hat that Joseon gentleman wore. And we gave our last one away to a friend who was visiting, and we said, no problem, we'll just go buy another one. And then we weren't able to find one of decent quality.
Ethan Miles says, hi.
Hello, Ethan. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Fog.
What did he say?
Hi, cool, fit. I don't know if that was a... Sure, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm just finishing off this end in a way that will allow it to be the same length as this one, right? Okay, I've got a little more space there. Thankfully, finger loop braiding is naturally elastic, so it really does lend itself to applications like this where you might, like shoulder straps, where you might want a little flexibility.
Oh, I think it's, Bada
Nore? Bada we Nore? Yeah.
Bada we Nore says, I think I heard that you know that hanbok was lost by Japanese rule.
Yes. Yes. So that is a very sad thing that happened during the Japanese occupation of Korea. Many hanbok were destroyed, or even parts of the palace were actually stolen and taken to Tokyo and set up as people's private homes. And then when this earthquake happened in Tokyo in the early 20s, I think it was 1921, Tokyo burnt to the ground, and those historic Korean buildings that they'd taken with them also burnt to the ground. The Japanese then eventually returned the stones, foundational stones that didn't burn. So if you go to Gyeongbokgung and to the Crown Prince's Palace, you can see the stones that were returned, but they're too damaged by the fire to actually be reincorporated into the reconstruction. So, yeah.
Fogwell asks if you have those Japanese flip-flops with the wooden soles.
I do not have those. No, I do not. I actually have only started to build a kimono kit, and all I have right now is the outermost layer, none of the other layers. So, no, I do not have, and I forget what the name for those platform shoes is.
Alan says it's late there. He's got a lot of videos to watch, so he's going to bed. Good night, everyone.
Thank you for joining us, Alan. I look forward to seeing you at future live streams, and thank you for supporting.
And he thinks those shoes are called shukos.
Shuko, thank you. I will check that out afterwards. Yep. No, I definitely need to expand on my traditional Korean or traditional Japanese kit.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so I've packaged this end up now, and I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the correct side of the garment. Yay.
Harder to make a mistake at this point.
It's, yes, little bit more obvious where I have to put things at this point. So again, I'm just going to bury the needle and have it come out roughly where I want to actually start whip stitching the strap on to the top of the soktima. And this is definitely a combination of, modern hanbok combined with historical hanbok. If you ever go to Korea and you commission a hanbok to be made and you want it to be historical, you're probably unlikely to get historical from a standard hanbok maker because they really are making it's still, even though it is a single hanbok, it is a person, a real person making them. Most of them are older individuals who don't necessarily understand or care about historical Korean clothing. And so they're going to take whatever picture you give them and they're going to interpret it through a modern hanbok filter. And so you're going to get the modernized version of whatever it is you want made. And you have to be super duper explicit about everything you want. If you don't want modern snaps, if you actually want the historical otkuram, the historic ties everywhere, you have to be very, very clear about that. If you don't want a modern arm's eye, if you want the historic jogori geometric construction arm's eye, you have to tell them that. And I learned that, unfortunately, the hard way. I'm going to actually try to remake some of the jogori that I commissioned to actually then have the geometric, get rid of the arm's eye. It's going to take a lot of piecing together though, so I'm not certain whether I won't just leave those as modern wearable jogori with modern clothing and then just make my own historical jogori. It was an unfortunate lesson learned.
So Susan is curious if you're going for Tokugawa or Heian.
Oh, the kit I have is modern. No, I'm talking about my modern Japanese formal wear, not historical at all. If I were to do historical Japanese, it would be Heian, just 100%. It's all those beautiful layers, sleeves, and train on the ground. I mean, that really sings to my soul.
And Fogwall is asking, where do you get the time to do this?
Yeah, I don't sleep much, and I pretty much this is what I do all the time. That's, yeah.
And I'm currently retired.
Yeah. This is, I don't really have vacations as such. Everywhere I go, this is kind of what I'm doing. Yep.
Susan loves Heian.
Yeah, Heian is just so elegant. So gorgeous. And you can actually see a similar aesthetic in that to the early Heian. You can see that in the Tang Dynasty, and you can see that in the late Shilla. It's sort of these long, graceful layers of silk. It's, as with many things in Japan, it's taken to the next level. It's kind of, it was an aesthetic that seemed to have made the rounds at about roughly the same time over a couple of century period in Eastern Asia. Okay, I'm just going across the back and putting some whip stitches to whip stitch the strap to the top of the soktima. So it's now whip stitched around this part and now whip stitched along the back there. Yep. And then we're almost done. Yeah.
Hooray. I'm actually really hungry for breakfast.
We're really hungry. We're going to do something that is absolutely, we've been eating traditional Korean food for a couple of days. There is actually here in Gyeongju, this is the kind of thing you'll get on my travel channel, an amazing brunch cafe that does one of the best brunches in the world. They make their own sourdough bread, and I mean real sourdough. They have amazing hollandaise sauce. Their eggs Benedict Supreme comes with all kinds of wonderful vegetables. Yeah, so that's where we're going for brunch this morning because I need something not Korean. After a while, the flavors start to seem kind of similar, even though it's all delicious. I'm a variety kind of person, so yeah. Don't hate us.
Mariwinore says, the Gyeongbokgung Palace and other hanboks were lost by Japan. How do you get to know the story? Well, we visited a lot.
Yeah, one of my main things is history, right? I love knowing the history of the places I go. If I go to a place, the first thing I try to find out is its history. And I read a lot. We have multiple books about the history of Korean historical buildings, and yeah. Wherever we go, we try to learn about the place. I feel like it's important when you travel or when you live in a place to understand the history of that place, the culture of that place, and then you get closer to the people and understanding why things are the way they are. So that's why we travel, we visit places, we take tours, we read books, we learn. Okay, so this one is now done, and I'm just going to cut these little frilly bits off that have peeked out. In fact, I have a tour of Changdeokgung Palace from 3 years ago, actually. Crazy. If you're interested in checking out one of the most beautiful of the Korean royal palaces in Seoul, I have a tour of that on my travels channel and on Creative Contessa, actually. And it was done during the pandemic, so I am wearing a mask because those were required at the time, and I am in hanbok for that, and I talk about the history of the place. So if you're interested in checking out taking it's about a 22-minute tour of the palace and learning about its history, you can check that out after this. Just look up Korean Palace maybe, or Changdeokgung Palace Tour might bring it up.
Guido Planet says great craftswomanship, and Bariwi Nore says good.
Yeah, yeah, okay, so I'm just measuring, I'm checking to make sure the straps are the same length now that I've got this one sewn on, so I'm just gonna stack it like that, and I'm gonna gently line these up. Now I don't wanna pull, because if I pull, then I'm creating an artificial stretch that I don't actually want to be there until it's on my body, right? So I'm just lining this up and seeing that basically I can just finish this end off with some whip stitches and then cut those loops and fold it down, and it's the right length. So yay.
They've got to go now. It's bedtime in Texas. Hope to get another stream soon.
Thank you so much for joining us, Phoenix. Really appreciate your support, and I've enjoyed having you today.
The name Barawi Nore means Song of the Sea.
Song of the Sea. I know. So the word Nore, I was like song something.
Nore,
yeah.
Nore
That's a beautiful, beautiful name. That's gorgeous. Did you choose that name because of an affinity for the sea, because you love the ocean, or you love to sail, or yeah? What made you pick such a beautiful name? So I actually just figured out a way to finish this off a little bit more better easily, and it's essentially weaving using my needle and thread as the weft. I'm actually just crossing back and forth through these end bits a couple of times, and that will actually, these things I learn while doing or figure out while doing, and I think that's actually going to make it easier to keep this, to hold it together for the whip stitching process to finish it off. Discoveries with the Creative Contessa. Okay. Once more onto the breech, and then I will snip these loops and then finish it off. Oh yeah, look at that. It stays much more neatly. Oh, yeah. Yay! New technique discovered, created, relearned, reconstructed, whatever. There is often in living history, there is a bit of reinventing the wheel, because these techniques are not always either described in original sources or even clear in the extant garments or the extant pieces that have survived. So sometimes you really do figure things out as you go and improve the process, and sometimes those improvements may have been the way it was done in the period in question or not. And, you know, for me, that's one of the joys of living history, of exploring historical handcraft, is the excitement of discovery, of exploration, of invention. It's one of the reasons I actually prefer, you know, a period like the 15th century and or earlier, because there's less information about it. So it actually, there's less obvious information about it, which means there's still room for lots of discoveries and lots of new ideas and a bit more creativity that can be reasonably applied.
So for the name, of course I like the sea, but it's one of the lyrics of my favorite song, so I use the nickname.
Ah, nice. That's a good reason.
Cats will be cats says mutton sleeve dresses are probably heavy for your shoulder. Imagine carrying an anvil with those sleeves.
Mutton. Mutton sleeve dresses. Are you talking, when you say mutton sleeves, are you talking about the late 19th century mutton sleeves? Or are you talking about like the 15th century mutton sleeves? Because they're both called mutton sleeves, but they're obviously actually completely different in their look, which is funny. I actually I've worn dresses with extremely big and extremely heavy sleeves, what would seem to be heavy sleeves, and the Victorian ones. Yeah, I've worn those mutton sleeves too. They're fine. I never noticed that it was uncomfortable, honestly, myself. Of course, I'm in pretty tight physical condition and I do a lot of strength training, so maybe I'm not the best person to ask about that. But the other thing is, if you grow up wearing a particular kind of garment, your body develops the muscles to wear it. So it could be a question of, maybe modern bodies not necessarily being developed in the right way to wear the historical garment.
That's why I can't wear this.
But with time, that would change with frequent wearing. Your body would eventually adapt to it, even if you didn't grow up that way per se. Okay, just doing some buttonhole stitches to finish this off. Finish this edge off. Right, okay. And now I'm going to final attachment. Yep. Just going to double check to make sure everything is still the correct length. It is, and I can go ahead and fold that under to create that package we talked about. Remember, measure thrice, cut once, measure thrice, sew once kind of thing? Yeah.
Line up to the strap place once.
Yeah. It's a good rule to abide by. Because, you can always, if you don't cut enough, you can always cut more. But if you cut too much, piecing things together is possible. But oh my God, annoying if you don't have to.
Let's see here. Kaylee, I have to put the baby to bed, so I must go, but thank you for sharing how to do this.
Thank you for joining us, Kaylee. Really appreciate you. Appreciate your support as always. I hope the baby putting down goes well. That doesn't sound good. That sounds terrible. I hope, oh wow, that was, please don't ban me, YouTube. What I meant is, I hope that putting the baby to bed goes peacefully and easily and quickly. Damn, yeah, some things don't work. Some syntaxes don't work in English, apparently. That would have worked in German just fine. Okay. We're at the home stretch, guys. Last set of attachment, one last set of threading, and then we will be good to go. Yeah. So as I said before, just to remind you, I wax my thread after I thread my needle, because if you wax your thread before you thread your needle, then the wax can actually interfere with the threading process, especially on fine needles like this one is.
The most fascinating thing about Rococo dresses is the ruffle on ruffle, pagoda lace sleeves, lace decorations everywhere, pastel colors, and over-exaggerated layers.
The Rococo really takes the frills to the next level. No doubt about it, which is funny because you can tell it's fashion always does this. It snaps back and forth between simple and extreme and ornate, right? So you've got the Rococo complexity and extreme layers and what in essence is a busy look, really. And then by the end of the 18th century, people are saying, yeah, but does it have to be this way? And the young people, as always, it's nearly always the young people who decide they want something different. Then you get the simplicity of the Regency fashions, the purity, in quotes, of the purity of the classically inspired line. And then eventually, people say, well, we like this line of dress, but we do actually miss the frilliness. And so, by the 1820s, the frills are coming back. And then by the middle of the 19th century, oh my God, it's frills galore. Yeah, it is fascinating how fashion goes in spurts like that. Okay, one final measurement just to make sure they're roughly the same. They don't have to be exactly the same. There is some flexibility. So if one strap is a little different than the other, it's no big deal. But you don't want, a 3-inch difference that's going to be uncomfortable and awkward. Okay, we are good. Right. I'm going to anchor my thread first. Did I sleep wax this? I think I must have slept waxed this.
What do you mean?
It feels waxy, but I actually have no memory of waxing it. Everyone, did I wax this thread? Wow. Talk about subconscious, unconscious movements. I was thinking about frills instead. Oh, wow. And I actually didn't track the fact that I was waxing. That's pretty interesting. Okay, well, welcome to my brain. It's a strange place. I hope you enjoy the ride. Okay. I'm just going to bury that tail, that knot there, and go ahead and do some whip stitching. See, you would have had plenty of time to finish that. I told you would. There was a lot of things to do. We had to finish ends and.
Just because you've now been on the live for an hour 20?
Yeah, I told you we'd have time. You never believe me.
I thought you'd so much quicker.
Excuse me. I'm trying to demonstrate useful techniques to my community, not just so quickly. Also, I wanted it to be finished and not just, come undone. Okay, final sets of whip stitches here. So one of the things we love about staying where we're staying right now is how peaceful and quiet it is. Okay, and as I say that, I can suddenly realize I can hear the highway roaring vaguely in the background. But you ignore that sound. That sound blends away. There are roosters everywhere. It's a different kind of noise, actually. There's roosters crowing kind of all the time. At nighttime, there's a cacophony of horny frogs trying to score a mate. But it's a different kind of sound than city sounds. It's
I still hear the frogs right now too.
And not as much though.
Not as much.
Not as yeah. There are some apparently diurnal frogs who just keep the party going. And tree frogs are very prominent here. And as many of you, some of you may know, tree frogs are remarkably loud for their tiny little body size. It's almost like they're compensating for something or overcompensating for something. Am I still in camera? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay. Last stitch, and then we will knot, by which I mean put in a knot.
We will not knot.
We will not. K-N-O-T, not N-O-T. All right, here we go. Okay, so that, bury the needle as per always. Snip as close to possible, wow, as close as possible. And there we have it. We have our straps in the front. We want to hold it up so we can. There we have it. And that's how it will go on. Okay, are there any questions, comments, final statements before we part ways for the nonce? Stay tuned on my Travels with the Creative Contessa channel for a tour of the Joseon era hanbok village that we'll be visiting in a couple of hours. And tonight we'll be doing the night tour of the amazing historic sites here in Gyeongju. And then tomorrow will be the Gyeongju Museum tour. And then the day after that will be another medieval crafting party. So yeah, I hope to see you all back. Any final comments or questions, Hanson?
Double check and make sure that something hasn't happened.
And if I didn't get to a comment or question and you still have it, pop it in the comments under the video once it actually posts, and you can do so. And I promise I will get to it. I always keep an eye on those comments.
Yeah, we missed some comments. There's this one painting of Marie Antoinette. It's considered scandalous at the time because she was wearing a chemise, which is an undergarment, and was considered English feminine.
Yeah, the robe à la chemise. Yeah, the chemise dresses from that era are a lot of fun, and actually, I think make great outerwear for the modern world. Would make a great summer dress. I actually do plan on making one. Yeah.
Susan got a comment held for review.
Susan.
How was the Horn Frog Symphony last night? And then the one that was horny, not horn.
Oh, goodness. You know, it's funny what YouTube will let through, what not absolute sexist garbage it will let through, and what it will then decide to block. That's pretty funny, actually.
Thanks for the vlog. People talking about pooping. Why?
Interesting. Okay. Well, you know. Just so you can see, this is what's left of the finger loop braid I did yesterday. And I generally keep these little bits because you never know when you might need something. I could actually see this turning into the base for a frog. The frog clasp, you know. So yeah, I will probably keep this and not just throw it away or something. Or keep it as a sample. If you do what they did in the Middle Ages, you might sew it into our finger loop braiding book as an example of a garment. Okay.
Everyone's jumping on the poop bandwagon.
Weird.
Badinori, give me the hearts.
Thank you all for joining us then. I'm going to call it good. If we didn't answer a question and you have one or you have a comment to share further, just pop it in the comments under the video and I will see to it. Otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you have been enjoying our live stream so much. This has just been really fantastic for me. And I look forward to seeing you all later, maybe on Travels with the Creative Contessa. Okay, everyone. Have a wonderful creative day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of the day it is for you. Until later, stay creative. Bye.
I don't know why at the end there's